All right, you good.
We're good? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good morning. Thank you guys so much for your patience. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to January's Chat and Chew. If you have not gotten an opportunity to grab something, some refreshments, please do. We have a few different speakers. So this is the lineup. We're going to talk a little bit about MCAT and Devil's results, have an MCAT discussion, learn a little bit more about some of the reading and literacy expectations for the different grade levels. And then we do have some really helpful handouts that we found what your students should know at the end of each grade level. Just to kind of center us about, I think so. There we go. Just to kind of center us about what your students should know, how to ground it, and how we can provide support to be a collaboration of learning for your students. So you may see some things that your student doesn't necessarily master that you could help us understand more about. We can provide supports too. So this presentation is kind of going to do all of those things and then talk a little bit about MCAT and that standardized testing.
I got my clicker. I'm up. All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm actually going to move this over a little bit because I have a lot of visuals. I want to make sure you can see my visuals. So my name is Miss McDonald. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm the librarian here in Hamilton. And my lens of reading is all about finding the just right book, but in a different lens than you might be thinking of. So I wanted to start off with a quote. There is no such thing as a child who hates to read. There are only children who have not found the right book. And I find this to be true for a lot of children. And I always think of my nephew as a prime example of this, and I'll touch on that in a few moments. So I went ahead and I have some, like a little visual here for like more kind of like 3rd to 5th grade, but this could also kind of tie into 2nd grade. It's all about finding the just right genre for your child and even really for yourself, honestly. And so these are just some pretty popular ones. Some of them repeat themselves a little bit. And so I'm going to touch on each one really quickly with a couple examples of each. So fantasy, think of like magical, mystical creatures, some epic adventures. I will say The Lost Library is one of our Battle of the Books this year. It's a Black Eyed Susan nominated book. But these are some pretty popular ones in our library. Wings of Fire is a very popular one. I know this was the first book that my nephew got interested in reading, and he said he hated reading, and it was my life goal to find a just right book for him. And then once he got Wings of Fire, that's all it took. So here are a couple of them for fantasy. Mystery, The Babysitter's Club, has found its way back in a new updated version. There's also the graphic novel version as well. And so this is really where there's some sort of like a puzzle. They had to figure out a secret. Something's kind of going on. And if you kind of think about that as adults, like those like thriller books are kind of like those mysteries in a way, right? You just keep guessing, trying to figure out what's going on. Some adventure books. Dogtown is by Catherine Applegate. She's one of my favorite authors. She wrote The One and Only Ivan, The One and Only Bob, The One and Only Ruby, The One and Only Family, Dogtown, Otter, which will really introduce your absolute love of otters. That was me. So this is a great story, also one of our Battle of the Books this year. The Last Kids on Earth is a very popular series with a lot of our 4th and 5th graders this year. And there's also a Netflix show about that as well. So humor, just a good old funny book. And so Gordon Corman is a really good author for that. He writes a lot of really funny things. Alvin Ho is a book that I read with my 2nd graders years ago. There's a whole series. It's hilarious. 10 out of 10 recommend. So these are some pretty popular ones. My nephew, who I told you about before, he's in 6th grade. And one of his classes, they did a book club with this James Patterson Middle School. The worst years of my life, and he absolutely loved it and wouldn't stop talking about it. So realistic fiction. Those are those stories that are made up, but they have those realistic, features to them where they're about really just, I think, like wonder, for example, real life things that happen with a made up story element to it. So here are some there. Dork Diaries is very popular amongst the girls. Historical fiction. This one has become very popular with the fifth grade books, or fifth grade boys, I should say. These are just those historical events that are true, that there is a fictional story based on it. Alan Gratz is a phenomenal author. If you like historical fiction, 15 out of 10 recommend his books. He's written quite a few. And then there's the good old nonfiction. These are those books we're reading to just really to learn something, inform, educate, or inspire. And so these are a couple just examples. And then the biggest one here, the graphic novels. This was one, when I came into the library 3 years ago, one of the biggest things was to look at our collection and where were we lacking. Graphic novels was the one. So I really spent a lot of time trying to find really good, appealing graphic novels. So here are some pretty popular ones. Things in the Basement is a great one. This is one of our Battle of the Books this year. It's very good. A lot of art history in there and not a lot of words, which is what I really loved about that one, because it kind of gets you looking to find more information about it. We were very fortunate last year. Terry Livingston, she wrote Invisible Emmy, Always Anthony, Remarkably Ruby. It's like a whole series. We actually got her to come to our school last year and do an author visit, so that was very fun. Kids loved it. And one of, I will say, the fifth grade boys have loved this series, but it's the science comics. They love them. Like, they were getting 4 at a time. So if your student is into science, definitely would recommend. Okay, so I have 8 tips with a lot of visuals just to kind of show you with getting your child to find the just right genre for them. One of them is to visit the library. And so we have the Hamilton branch of the Knapp Pratt Library down the street, which is a great source. And also the Central branch. If you've never been to the Central branch, I 10 out of 10 recommend going down. It's a beautiful building. They restored it, and there's just books everywhere. But really spending the time to actually look at the books, as opposed to just kind of feeling that rush to like, oh, I got to pick something. Unfortunately, it's one of the downsides with our school library is that kids don't always have time to like really explore a whole lot, because there's just not enough time of the day. So I would recommend taking your child to the library as much as you can to expose them to that. Another thing would be to have like almost think of like an anthology, a bunch of short stories with different types of stories in there to see what kind of like piques their interest. And then maybe even consider having like a little book club with your child and their friends, and they try different books. Using their interest as a guide. So say your child's really into dogs, Dogtown is the book for them. If they're really into space, a Rover story is a great choice. If they really love dragons, the Wings of Fire series. And then also a new story that just came out, Impossible Creatures, is very good as well. And I've heard that's very good for audiobooks. Like the voices are great. So also encouraging sampling and exploration of those different genres. Because again, you never know what's gonna pique their interest, right? So audiobooks. In my newsletter that I posted on Dojo, I talked about Sora and how you have access to that, your child does. But also Libby is an option as well. And then something that in February, I'm going to kind of roll out with the students as a choice is the Great Genre Challenge. So basically they have all the different genres. And so for like the top part, there's like 3 sections to the circle. So they have to read 3 different adventure books. They like shade it in however they want. And when they complete that.
Please pardon the interruption. Would Peyton Towns please report to Ms. Proctor's office at this time? Peyton Towns to Ms. Proctor's office. Thank you.
And then when they complete that, then they can come see me to get a little badge to go over top. So the goal is to explore all those different genres. And let them read. That's the next step. Just let them have their own choice. Let them read whatever they want. See what they like. Because really, you just never know what's going to hook them. To make it a family activity, I have a QR code here. There's an article from Scholastic that has a couple different ideas for what you can do as a family, whether it just be like modeling, whether you're reading, maybe you have like a little book talk, a bunch of great options. But I'll let you read through those. My QR code. One of my favorite things is to incorporate play and creativity. So say, these are one of my favorite series. Ordinary People Change the World. I Am and then fill in the blank with a lot of different people. So I am Harriet Tubman. So maybe you read about Harriet Tubman and then you're like, you know what? Let's take this a little further and we can go to Cambridge, Maryland, and we can actually go visit the museum. So that'd be a fun little thing. Maybe if your student is learning about Katherine Johnson, then maybe you're like, you know what? And then on Friday, we're going to have a movie night and we're going to watch Chicken Fingers. Maybe you're reading Nachos, which is actually the origin story behind nachos and how that came to be. And then maybe for dinner one night, you have nachos and you make it like a fun thing. I was thinking like some arts and crafts, but sometimes for the older ones, if that's not their thing, you might not get them as much. But I think nachos will definitely get some of your kiddos. Because last year, we read that story and they all wanted nachos. That's all we could talk about. And then also like pay attention to their feedback. So like if you can tell they're not super interested, then be like, okay, hey, you know what, this wasn't the one for you, but let's try a different one. Ask them questions while they're reading. The other thing you can do too is something called the first chapter rule. So say they pick up a book that interests them, they think, at least have them read the first chapter of it and see if it hooks them in. And if it doesn't, if it's something they're reading to enjoy, like don't make them continue to read it. Say like, hey, maybe that wasn't the one for you. Let's try something different. And then also having like this challenge tracker, if your student decides they want to do this, take a look and see how it goes. Maybe they put like a little smiley face if they enjoyed the book to kind of track it, check in with them, maybe keep a log, whatever fits for you in your situation. And then be patient because it's not every book is going to be for everyone. And you might pick up a book one time, say you pick up historical fiction in the 3rd grade and you're like, this is the most boring thing I've ever done in my life. But then they're in 5th grade and they try it again and they've matured a little bit. Maybe they heard about something, they watched something, and then they try a different book within that genre, and then it just clicks and they really love it. So that's it. So quick version. Anyone have any questions? Yeah.
So last night, okay, you said the Sora app, but
Yes.
you said, was there another app that you guys have for audio or books? You mentioned something that I couldn't remember what it was.
Is it Libby?
Becoming class.
Well, so was it through Clever?
It might have been through class.
So through Clever, there's Sora, and that can connect with the Knockcraft library.
Okay.
So like
And that's for ebooks and audiobooks? Or just,
yeah, ebooks, audiobooks.
Okay.
There's even like magazines and
Okay,
magazines
maybe
in there
that
too.
was what he was talking about. Because he was telling me about something we have learned about animals on an ebook at school. So that would be the Sora world.
Well, I'm trying to think what portion I've done. I'm not sure if maybe like his teacher used a different app.
Okay.
I can look into it and I can let
That's
you
fine.
know.
No, I mean, I can ask
Yeah.
him again. It was worries like, so context with the Sora is,
Yeah.
do they read that on their, on those, or are they able to access those on other
You can actually
devices?
access them on other devices.
Okay, that
Yep.
was really the core.
The core, yep, you can download it and you can access it, and
Okay.
then you just access it through their Clever account.
Okay, okay, I think I can have that.
Yeah. And if you have questions, just send me a message on Dojo and I can like show Coltrane or just like walk you through something.
But
Yeah.
you to find the thing.
Yeah.
Thank you for the WWE book.
You're welcome.
Wouldn't have expected it, but here we are.
You know what? And knowing Coltrane, I also would not have expected it, but here it was, right? And so, and maybe it's even like they're reading recipes, right? They're just helping. And so finding a thing. So, yeah.
And thank you for.
So it is like my mission. When they tell me they don't like reading, I said, challenge accepted. Little Fitzy was one of them.
You were going to bring that
I didn't like
up.
to read. It was a whole thing. I taught Austin in 2nd grade because that's where I was before in the library. And he didn't want to read, and he didn't want to read, and he didn't want to read. And then one day, Kirby manga hooked him in.
And spent all my money at the book
And
fair.
then he said, when the rest of them came in, this is the best day of my life. And I quote,
Yeah, she took a picture
and I'll
and
never
sent it to
let
me
it go.
and printed it out.
Just to be really, But anywho, so thank you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out from the dojo.
I'm not.
Make sure you turn that off so don't come back at it.
Amen. So,
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I say one more thing?
yeah, go ahead.
I did bring some library books down that are from different genres. If you want to look at them, please don't take them home with you though. But we have like different labels on there. So in the library, and the goal is to kind of get the classrooms also to genreify their libraries. And so I'm working slowly but surely on that process as opposed to like a leveled library. Because if someone says, I want a book that's funny, well, how are you going to find it? But now, vacation weekend. So if you want to take a look at this.
Wasn't that the perfect place to put her, like out of second grade and then into this girls?
And then I get to do the extra stuff.
So thank you, Ms. McDonald. So two of the standardized tests, and we're going to touch on a little bit. It's MCAT and then DIBELS. So the beginning of the school year, all of the students take a DIBELS assessment. K through 5. Good gosh, K through 5. And the test is not the same for every grade level. It's broken down for phonemic awareness, letter recognition, words read, and then reading comprehension where they read a passage. So it's a building block. And so this is like the strand that build into a skilled reader, because by third grade, students are reading for reading comprehension and not necessarily learning how to read. From pre-K to second, they are learning how to read, with second being that tricky grade that we are looking for them to master how to read. So then in third grade, they will be reading to comprehend what they're reading to be able to ask questions. And so that is an intricate process that uses all of these different strands to build that skilled reader. And so that's why we know that it's so important to understand what each grade level should master so that you will be proficient for the next grade level. That's really what we're trying to uncover with our students and our parents, and trying to make that home connection about the importance of reading, because you have to have some tenacity with these other standardized testing to push through, because the questions just keep coming. So the DIBEL results. Students in K through 5 take the DIBEL test. It's a one-on-one test. It's administered by a teacher through various sub-testing, and changes the student, changes grade level. So in September, you should have received some BOY, or beginning of the school year data about your student and their reading capabilities. We are in the midst of taking the MOY, the middle of the year assessment, and then you get one at the end of the year in May. Students' performance is leveled and scored based on a nationally norm cut score, and students who are below or well below the grade level are progress monitored to keep tabs on their growth and needs. And so I don't know if you got a chance to peek, but there was a small group that went into this space. That's a math small group. But throughout the day, students are pulled for math and ELA small group, which is why it's so important for students, especially if they are below or well below, to be in class, because they miss those small group opportunities. And sometimes they're not able to reschedule them because they have so many different groups throughout the day. It just doesn't work out. So during the first week in February, your student's teacher will send you home a copy of their score report. On this, you should be able to see how your student did overall, which is a composite score of the subtest. So there's a composite score here, and then the color-coded tells you where they scored on those subtests. And I hope everyone's familiar with can I not remember? Amplify, there we go. Amplify is the at-home version of this. So Amplify will continue to build your students' ELA capacity based on how they scored on this test, which is so important why students spend time doing Amplify at home. So the various sub-test scores and where the student is for that net grade and level of expectation is here. So this student scored a 16, which they're a yellow subset and decoding. And then it gives you an example of what decoding means. So there's a lot of information on these reports at home to parents. And then these are the different tips that you can use and ways you can support your students at home. But one of those biggest components is going to be the Amplify, because it is literally taking the opportunity to give your student more practice in decoding. This student also needs more practice in reading comprehension. So that app will do that for your student. It's tailored specifically for that student's need.
I have a question about Amplify. So that's usually like, if we're having a stressful homework situation, that's one of the things that we like don't press. So does that mean if he takes his testing, it won't, is it based off the Amplify, or is the testing based separately? So if the Amplify hasn't been, if he hasn't been as consistent, is it going to like give him different test questions? for the standardized testing?
So the standardized testing won't change. It will not be based off of his uses of Amplify. However, with the more practice that he gets,
It's gonna be more familiar.
correct, because the testing that we do is 1 minute, and 1 minute can feel like a long time, but it really isn't if you're still processing
Yeah.
and you're still decoding when you should be reading.
Yeah.
And so that's why the repetition comes with using Amplify, because you'll build that fluency you'll need to master what you need to do in that 1 minute. Because honestly, each subtest is 1 minute long, and that's not a lot of time if you're not confident in what that next sound is, what that next word is, and you haven't built a capacity to actually have fluency.
Yes.
What portal is that amplified through?
It's actually through Clever, and it should be on all of the students' school issued laptops. I'm trying to get it out. Yep. All right. So Miss F is going to come up and talk a little bit about the mock MCAT and the MCAT that our school has been hosting. You want me to be your cooker? Okay. There you go. Unless anybody else had any questions, I'm sorry.
Good morning. I'm Miss Airth. I am the middle school literacy intervention teacher, but I'm also the school test coordinator. So I coordinate pretty much any kind of like test, district or state test that the students here have to do at any grade level. So I am just going to talk about the MCAT real quick. These are the sessions that they have to do. So they are grades 3 through 8. They have to do the MCAP, which is the state test. This is what they have to do. They all have 4 70-minute sessions for literacy and 40-minute sessions for math. And then our 5th and our 8th graders have to take the MISA, which is a science test. It's standardized. And that is for 40-minute sessions. And then the 8th graders have to take a social studies one. So the 8th grade is really where they have like a ton of the standardized tests. Oh, there you go. All right. So these are the dates that we have for our testing. So the MISA comes a little bit before the MCAP. So this is the science test, and then this is in March. So the first week of March, the 5th and the 8th graders take the MISA. And then starting at the very end of April, we start with the MCAP testing. So this is the schedule that we have here. We'll put these dates out a little bit closer to that time so that everybody is aware of those times. All right, and I'll just talk a little bit about the MCAP. So we know that the MCAP, we've all had to take standardized tests. It is very different from when we were kids and had to take standardized tests. We know with the common curriculum shift that everything has kind of shifted with that. The MCAP is on grade level, so it is not adjusted versus if your kids are taking iReady or any kind of like formative assessment in the classroom where levels can be adjusted. This is all at grade level. So that's why it is very important during the school year, even if your child is lower or even higher, to expose them to grade level skills, because they have to take the grade level test, which it does a lot of things, especially when you get into middle school later, your composite score and getting into high schools. So those things do end up mattering eventually. Is that it? I do have just, I'm not gonna talk because I think I'm talking to mostly primary parents here, but there are just some tips. It gives you a little bit of information about the MCAP, and actually the dates are on here in the back if you need them. I also have just some tips on like the day of, a little magnet if you would like to take one, of just reminders around before the test. Make sure kids have breakfast, make sure that they're on school on time so they don't feel rushed, they have their computer charged and ready, and that you're just very positive, because a lot of kids do get very frustrated. These tests are hard. Even as adults, look like, what is going on here? It is very confusing, and it is very different from when we took standardized tests. All right, are there any questions about anything? Okay.
So, just on the difference between when we took tests versus today,
Mm-hmm.
why are they so confusing and this different?
Well, when
What's the science behind
we took the shift, so the shift into Common Core, the research that came before Common Core came out came from the majority of like industries that are hiring right now. And they were like, what do we need? And so that's why the focus is on college and career ready. So they spoke to these career fields, what the world needs now. And they're like, what skills do people need to know when they're coming into the workforce? Because we know that the world has changed. We have done a huge technology shift. And so when you look at engineering and a lot of the things that are current today in the workforce, that's how they kind of develop these skills. And so a lot of that is a little more critical thinking instead of just basic thinking, where it's like you may have to problem solve, you may have to do this, you may have to think a little bit deeper than we did previously. So the shift kind of happened. I mean, I guess if you think about the course of history, it did happen fast, but it really was over the course of probably like 6-8 years that we really tried to do it. But it was a hard shift. I'm not going to say it was. Even as a teacher, it was a lot to wrap your head around this kind of shift, because you, just speaking from this is year 23 for me in Baltimore City. And so I've seen all of that from when I started. And I did start teaching in kindergarten. I work with middle school now, but so I've really seen the shift over grade levels as well. So it really was more of a shift with like thinking. It was an adult shift. It was a kid shift but I know that that's what the research was behind the shift with Common Core and why it is different now. But it is even the format. So we used to just have, multiple choice, pick one, A, B, C, or D. Now they're like, okay, you can pick 2, maybe. You might only need 1, but it is very confusing. It's like, pick all that apply. And so it's like, okay, you don't know, it's not just 1. It could be all 4 of them. And then they also have 2-part questions where it's like, okay, the previous question, how would you back up that? And then you have to pick a piece of something. So it is very confusing. They also have more open-ended responses, but it is a lot more confusing, just the format of the test. Yeah. Sure. All right. Any questions on the MCAT? Okay. So just real quick before we do get to the MCAT, because we do want our kids to do well, we are doing a mock MCAT. So what that is just a test that's kind of based on the skills the MCAT is going to test, but it is very short. It's about 20 minutes long. But then the data that we get from that, we know how to inform our instruction between now and when we take the MCAT. So we're doing the first ones yesterday, today, tomorrow. And then we will do a second mock MCAT in March to see if what we did from the skills based on the first one has worked. Do we need to continue? Do we need to move forward? All right. And so this is going to help them. We take a look at the data and where kids need to practice with that. But it is kind of important, especially for our little ones, because it can be very intimidating when you go into this testing environment for the first time, especially the third graders. They don't really know what to expect. But it is kind of important. So we have tried to give them instructions that kind of sound exactly like MCAT does. It's on a platform that is very similar to MCAT, but just to kind of prepare them so that they don't get huge test anxiety when they do take the MCAT. Are there any questions about the mock MCAT?
Is it like what PS, like pre-SATs and the it's like a small portion of it?
Well, yeah. So the PSAT is meant to like prepare you for the SAT. So kind of, I guess. I don't know, like time wise, because we saw the time for it because they're doing 4 70-minute sessions, even the third graders for the MCAT. But this is just a 20-minute snippet, just to kind of, it'll just be like 1 question per skill, just to see if the kids are getting it. Do we need to, as a class, even, did everybody perform low in one area? Is this where we need to focus a lot of our energy, or is it just a group of kids that are performing low in one area and we need to pull a small group? But
Is this really just is this like a reading, writing, arithmetic kind of thing, or are we also doing like the social science skills that they're doing, getting the critical thinking stuff from there?
on the MCAT?
Yeah, is it, like, what are these grade level indicators?
So it is like they have them in the certain content areas, but there are within those pieces a lot of critical thinking, but they are still within the content areas.
Okay.
But there's nothing specific to, I mean, they do, the eighth graders take the social studies and the fifth and the eighth graders take the science ones.
Yeah, I find so.
Yes. So then when they get into high school, then they take more specific content areas, but we just, in the 3 to 8 setting, they just stick with the basic subjects.
And I do want to point out, we go from like those 1-minute assessments to like a 70-minute assessment,
Yeah.
which is why it's like we want to make sure we're encouraging our students to build that tenacity it's going to take to finish that assessment, because we've seen that some students are like, okay, I'm done. And it's not really showing up and being reflective of what they know. And these results, like, they do matter, but they matter the most when they start doing like high school choice and things like that, or even middle school choice for that matter. You know, I love Hamilton, we do have middle school. However, there are middle school choice where, you know, if you want your student to go somewhere else, those scores matter as well. And so I just want to make sure we took an opportunity as a school to make sure that we're supporting our parents and understanding what that should look like for our students making this error, which is why we found some literature like, you know, what your students should know for ELA by the end of 4th grade, and how you can be a partner in the process by helping us know what they don't know, right? How can we support you guys? How can we provide tutoring? Like, these are the things that we'll be talking about during budget season. Like, what priorities do we need? And I think we need to take an opportunity and talk about what have we uncovered so that we know what we need, right? And so that's kind of the whole purpose of like these chat and choose. And next month, February, will be about budgeting. What do we want to spend the money on? Now that we have this lump of money, how are we going to spend it effectively to support our students to get them to where we need them to go? And so that only happens with the input of our parents. So thank you all for coming out. Unless you have any additional questions, feel free to take any of the literature that we have. I'm going to try to put some of it upstairs as well, because I know the colder months are harder for people to come out. But this is really, really important because we're going into this testing season, the survey season, where our family surveys will be coming out as well, where you can give your feedback to the district as well as the school about what's important to you.
So testing, right now they're doing mock MCAS. When are the mid-year dibbles? Like right now as well? Is this